Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau at KSC. I singularly, however, am still joining you remotely from sunny Southern California, and it is good to be with you all this morning for wherever you're joining us around the world. We have most of our usual gang out with us today. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Photographer Adam Bernstein is out tracking the rocket and doing some still photography as well. And our other photographer, Michael Kane, has the morning off. If you'd like to follow them on their social media, you can find Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr., Adam Bernstein at ABurnNYC. And while you're over there on X, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We are also on Threads and Facebook if X is not your social media jam. We'll also be joined by our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs for tracking assistance on the Falcon 9 today. Taking a live look from Chuck's camera perspective, you're seeing there the Falcon 9 rocket standing at the heart of Historic Launch Complex 39A, preparing to launch the second of three planned missions for SpaceX so far this weekend. Of course, we had the successful launch from Pad 40 of the Starlink 8-3 mission, looking at Starlink 10-7 right now. There on your screen. 23 Starlink satellites on board this particular Falcon 9, getting ready to head up into low Earth orbit. That liftoff of the Falcon 9 on the 56th dedicated mission, launching Starlink V2 mini satellites, preparing to lift off at 10:49 a.m. Eastern, 14:49 UTC for our friends around the world. This will also be the 119th time that SpaceX launches this V2 variety of its Starlink satellites. But just for some context, as we're continuing on with the countdown, a little behind the scenes as we were getting ready for the stream and keeping our eyes on the pad as SpaceX was continuing to adjust the T0 liftoff time. SpaceX workers were doing some troubleshooting and did not vacate the pad until about the T-minus 2 hour, 15-minute mark as compared to our current T0 liftoff time. Normally, they clear the blast area about 3 hours prior to liftoff. So that's not to say that they won't make this launch time right now, but just to sort of couch that in, slightly needing to hustle a bit this morning. All that being said, once they did clear the area, they went right into conditioning the liquid oxygen at the pad ahead of fueling beginning in about 20 minutes, if that go ahead is given. So certainly every reason to believe that they still can make it today, but just wanted to give you that caveat in case either A, SpaceX pushes to the end of the window, which this morning is just another 10 minutes. Looking at T0 currently of 10:49 a.m. Eastern, and that window lasts until 10:59 on the East Coast. Certainly appreciate the more than 1,300 of you who are joining with us live this morning as we're getting going on a sunny Sunday morning on the Space Coast. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. It allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring in some more folks to our live coverage, and we'd certainly appreciate that. I also want to give a specific shout to Callistia Lee, one of our wonderful moderators in the live chat, and be sure to keep an eye out for any other mods that happen to pop in during the stream. Give them a hello. And remember, it helps make their job easier if everyone is kind and considerate to those in the live chat. Remember, even though you may have been here for umpteen number of launches, every launch stream could be someone's first, and they may have questions about the process, the payload, what have you. And so just remember how you were feeling the first time you saw a rocket launch and you were learning for the first time, and just extend that same grace to them if you would. Also, on behalf of Calistia, and now I see Stephanie B popping in for a quick good day. I see. Good day to you, Stephanie. Please refrain from using all caps or delving into overtly political topics. That is a quick way to get your comment blocked, or if you continue to persist, potentially kicked out of the live chat. And trying to be a welcoming environment, so help make everyone's job easier here. That'd be much appreciated. Speaking of the folks that are here, we are powered by a wonderful channel member community. So thanks to folks like the Rocket Girl, James, M. Teresa, Mark Otto, Kelly Alexander, Zephyr Wolf, Julie Polk, that old guy, SE Aviation, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop. That's spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course, the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments in 4K. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this launch or other happenings going on in spaceflight, or just want to pass along a kind message, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And if your comment or question is appropriate to be on our show, we'd love to bring you into the conversation. So thanks to Sean for kicking us off with a very generous $20 Super Chat. Thank you, Sean. Sean says, Shannon and Sean, watching Falcon launch from Cocoa Beach, Florida, celebrating our 43rd wedding anniversary. Congratulations on making it, hopefully, a very wonderful 43 years now, and hope you make it another wonderful 43 years in the future. Appreciate you spending part of your anniversary with us. That's awesome. And welcome to William Sassano, joining us channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, William. We're glad to have you with us. One last bit of housekeeping. We do have our relatively new Discord channel for channel members. If you're at the pad leader level, you're only able to access the general channel within the Discord. But for everyone who's a mission specialist on up, you've got full Discord access. So pop in, let us know what you think. If you have some thoughts, comments, suggestions for us, our ears are open. We're still sort of in a beta mode, if you will. So we certainly welcome the feedback. All that being said, we're about 13 minutes and some change away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director needs to make the call on the start of propellant load today. Seeing some venting there at the pad. That's become a more typical sight to see, especially here at pad 39A, about an hour-ish out from launch. SpaceX is running its countdown from its Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center. It's the facility where they refurbish Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights, as is the case with the booster you see there on your screen. That is B-1073, preparing to launch for a 17th time today. Talk a little bit more about its history just a bit. SpaceX also has support for this launch, in part from its control room at its headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, this morning, we're looking at a liftoff at 10:49 a.m. Eastern, 14:49 UTC. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch this morning, they do have a 24-hour backup opportunity on Monday, August 12th, that window opening up at 6:37 a.m. Eastern. Weather fairly ideal coming into today's launch opportunity. The 45th Weather Squadron forecast a 90% chance of favorable weather conditions at liftoff. And as you can see in our wide shot here, you know just what I'm talking about. Just a few wispy clouds in the area. So from someone who's not a meteorologist, this appears to be a very ideal weather day for a launch. So for folks in the area along the trajectory, which we'll talk about in just a second here, be sure to keep your eyes to the sky and let us know if you're able to spot the Falcon 9 as it makes its ascent. And if you capture any pictures, be sure to post them on social media and tag us. We'd love to see them. Now, T minus 48 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. We're just about 10 minutes away from the first milestone on the countdown timeline. So, again, if you are joining us for the first time or just want to refresh on how this all works, let's go ahead and talk about what we're anticipating as the countdown continues to progress. The SpaceX launch director will make the call to start a prop load at T minus 38 minutes, give or take. They do this electronically, so if SpaceX feels like they're in a good position to take that poll and proceed with the go ahead for fueling. They can do that a little bit earlier, but T minus 38 minutes is the approximate time that starts. But once that go is given, fueling begins with two events: the loading of rocket grade kerosene, or RP1, on the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T minus 16 minutes, second stage, liquid oxygen or LOX load begins. Before that happens, though, they need to condition the feed lines heading up to that second stage, and that chill down results in the so-called big vent. That process begins at about T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, but we see evidence of the big vent somewhere in the pocket of T minus 20 minutes and 30 to 20 seconds. T minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage get underway. The process involves flowing a small amount of that liquid oxygen I mentioned through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, and helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes prior to liftoff, the first stage RP1 or kerosene tank should be full. At T minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. That process starts with the clamp arms that are underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector with the strong back you see alongside the Falcon 9 there in the live box. That'll pull back about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, and at that point, pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes prior to liftoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. 2 minutes out, second stage LOX load is complete. At that point, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds. And of course, if all 9 Merlin 1D engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the bird for a T0 liftoff at 10:49 a.m. Eastern, 14:49 UTC, or in other words, in T minus 45 minutes, 21 seconds. Currently T minus 43 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. Talked about the countdown timeline. Now let's shift our attention to where this Falcon 9 is going to be flying once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Falcon 9, which is sitting, of course, on the live picture there on your screen at Launch Complex 39A. See that in the satellite view here. It's going to be lifting off in 43 minutes and 30 seconds, and when it does, it will head in a northeasterly trajectory along the excuse me, east coast of the United States. So for those in the Northwest Florida, Georgia, Carolinas area, if the lighting conditions and the cloud cover isn't too difficult to make it visible, you should be able to catch a glimpse of the Falcon 9 as it begins its uphill climb. Following stage separation, the first stage booster B-1073, the SpaceX fleet, will land on the SpaceX drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. Upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites. The fairing halves will be jettisoned a bit downrange of the map you see here on your screen. SpaceX will use one of its recovery vessels to scoop those up and bring them back on into Port Canaveral, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future flights. Payload fairing splash down in the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery effort, so it's an important part of their business model to make sure they get these fairings back every time they are able to do so. This is an image from a recovery effort a little more than a year ago now, right about sunset. Currently T minus 41 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. I teased yesterday that I would mention at some point today, as you can see a helicopter flying past the pad there in the live shot, that I would let you know a little bit more about our reporting trip out here and some of the other things that we've been up to in Southern California, which, again, thanks to all of you in our channel member community for making on the ground reporting like this possible. We are powered by you in many ways, and your support allows us to travel to places like Starbase for Starship launches and down here to Southern California for our most recent reporting, which was heading over to Rocket Lab's facilities in Long Beach, California, and getting a chance to get an up close look at their blue and gold spacecraft for NASA's Escapade mission. Those are going to be heading out soon to Florida, leaving the facilities there at Rocket Lab, making their final big terrestrial journey before Blue Origin gives them a ride on their way to Mars later on this year. That'll be a very cool mission to track. Of course, the first launch of a Blue Origin New Glenn rocket, which we've seen a lot of work on recently with the first stage booster model there at Port Canaveral as they're testing some of their port operations and have been doing some work with flight hardware that their CEO, David Kemp, have been showing on X, which has been great to see as well. But yeah, looking forward to sharing what we were able to see, some of our reporting and our conversations with the project manager of the Escapade hardware side, the development of those spacecraft. And so keep your eyes here on YouTube as well as on our website, spaceflightnow.com. We'll have more of our reporting from that coming out in the days to come. So keep your eyes peeled. We're now T minus 38 minutes, 54 seconds and counting, less than a minute away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director needs to make that call on the start of prop load. And then we'll look for signs of fueling once we get past the T minus 35-minute mark. We are currently Now at T minus 43 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. And you may have wondered why the countdown clock just jumped. Well, SpaceX set a new T0 hitting right at the end of the window today. So again, unclear if this has anything to do with the timing that I mentioned earlier of when they normally clear the pad versus when they did clear the pad. Nominally, they remove all personnel from the blast zone about 3 hours prior to liftoff, and they weren't able to get their folks cleared until about 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that may have played into the decision to push back the T0. Unclear. SpaceX has not uh, made any public statement on that, but of course, we'll continue to keep an eye on progress towards fueling. And the reason SpaceX was able to push back their liftoff time is because fueling had not begun. SpaceX uses a load and go style of propellant load for their rockets because they use a super densified liquid oxygen that is super chilled. They need to fuel their Falcon 9 pretty close to the point in which they're ready to actually launch the rocket. And so that's why, unless they feel like they're ready in most circumstances, they won't start fueling, which is the case now and why we're back at T minus 42 minutes and 22 seconds. Only at T minus 39 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Once again, just about a minute away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director needs to make a call to start a prop load. We're now T minus 36 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX will have needed to make a call on the start of prop load today if they are ready to proceed with fueling. Standing by for either word from SpaceX or evidence of fueling from the Falcon 9 rocket, which again, fueling begins at T minus 35 minutes, so we wouldn't see fueling beginning because it hasn't started yet. On an unrelated note, but just for the sake of the fact that it is also running in conjunction with this operation, want to note that Rocket Lab just completed its 52nd Electron rocket, sending a mission for Capella space up into orbit. That launch called A Sky Full of Stars, a synthetic aperture radar satellite, part of the Capella space constellation that they're working on. So congratulations to the Rocket Lab team on another successful Electron mission. Got many more working on the pipeline. Now, T minus 34 minutes, 33 seconds and counting, and we do have word from SpaceX that propellant load is now underway. They also confirmed that the weather is looking good, and they're tracking towards launching the 23 Starlink satellites on board this Falcon 9 rocket in just a little more than half an hour. We're now T minus 31 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. Take a look at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket near where the strong back starts to taper up. You can see a frost band beginning to form as the super cold liquid oxygen is beginning to load on board the Falcon 9 first stage. And just near the top of the frame, you can also see a little bit of venting from the strong back as well. Good signs of fueling in progress here. Also want to thank the more than 3,200 of you who are joining with us live this morning. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us to allow the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring some more folks into our live coverage. That would be certainly very much appreciated. I also want to thank a few folks for their support this morning. Thanks to Josh King for being a channel member for coming up on 2 years now, 22 months. Thanks as always for sticking with us, Josh. Thanks to Monkey Tree Rob for a $2 super chat and to Tim Martin for the same. Appreciate that from the both of you. Florida Gal with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Florida Gal. Good to see you this morning. And Mandy J. Huston, pardon me, for a $5 super chat. Thank you for your support this morning, Mandy. At this point in the fueling process, SpaceX is also loading cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. That helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same process will happen at the T minus 25-minute mark. On board the Falcon 9 rocket, of course, are 23 Starlink satellites. And earlier this week, the Starlink team shared a nifty animation, which we'll go ahead and bring up for you now. This illustrating, as they describe it, their partnership with the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, part of the National Science Foundation, demonstrating their ability to work with some of these radio satellites to avoid transmissions, as they describe it, into line of sight for those radio telescopes. Notable as well as we look at this animation as it loops, because this is the first time that I believe SpaceX has shared an image or a graphic of what a Starlink V2 mini satellite looks like in its on-orbit configuration. So different from the version 1.5 Starlinks, you can see the two solar panels extending from the flat body of the Starlink. So good visualization of what those will look like once they're deployed following spacecraft separation, a little more than an hour into this mission, as well as other future Starlink V2 mini flights. For context as well, this is the 56th dedicated Starlink mission this year and the 119th time that SpaceX has launched a batch of its V2 mini satellites to low Earth orbit. T minus 27 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. This particular first stage booster that's supporting this Falcon flight, tail number 1073 in the SpaceX fleet. Before we hit the so-called big vent, let's go ahead and run down the missions that it has notched so far in preparation for its launch today. First one up on May 14th of 2022. That was its first time launching Starlink satellites, sending up 53 of the version 1.5 Starlink satellites that I was just mentioning. That was followed on June 29th with a C-band communication satellite for Luxembourg-based company SES. It was SES number 22. Those were followed by the booster's first lunar supporting missions with the launch of the Hakuto R lunar lander on behalf of a company called iSpace. Apologies for the confusion. That was a bit of user error on my part. I'll take the hit for that one. Just skipping over a couple of Starlink missions and going right to the lunar mission. So let me remedy that by noting that this booster also launched Starlink 4-26 on August 10th and Starlink 4-35 on September 24th. And that was leading up to the aforementioned Hakuto R mission 1 on behalf of a company called iSpace in Japan. Then on February 7th, 2023, this booster launched the Amazonas Nexus satellite, Spanish communications satellite for Hispasat, covering the Americas, Europe, and North Africa. It was followed up by mission to the International Space Station with the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-27 mission. That was on March 15th, Ides of March in 2023. Missions 8 through 13 were all Starlink launches. Those were 6-2 on April 19th, 5-11 on June 12th, 6-12 on September 4th, 6-27 on November 8th, 6-37 on January 15th of this year, 6-41 on March 4th. It was followed by the first mid-inclination rideshare mission for SpaceX called Bandwagon 1, launching on April 7th. And then we hit Starlink 6-58 on May 13th, and the most recent launch was back on July 3rd with Starlink 8-9. Bringing us to today with the Starlink 10-7 mission, getting ready to launch in T-minus 22 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 20 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. You can see the big vent is very much in full swing here. Good sign that fueling is continuing on track with this Starlink mission today. Now 20 minutes prior to liftoff. T minus 16 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. Got about 10 seconds left on the big vent before that begins to subside, and second stage liquid oxygen load will begin at T minus 16 minutes. So far, fueling remains on track for a liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket just over 16 minutes from now at 10:59 a.m. Eastern, 14:59 UTC for those joining around the world. Taking a look at our live chat, want to thank the more than 5,700 of you who are watching with us live this morning. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us and allow some more folks to find their way into our live coverage. So we've got just a little more than 15 minutes standing between us and the launch of this Falcon 9. I want to thank a few more folks for your support this morning. Runs with Scissors, one of our wonderful channel members, for gifting $2 super chat. Thank you, Runs. Charles McMahon, marking 2 months as a channel member at the pad leader level. Glad to see you sticking with us, Charles. Charles says, thank you for the great launch coverage. Well, thank you, Charles, for supporting us and helping to make it possible. Greg Jazz Jr. with a $2 super chat saying, here we go again. Good to see you again, sir. And Bon Bon with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Bon Bon, for supporting us at that level. Bon Bon says, thank you for the educational and fascinating view on this platform. We're more than happy to provide views and information about this launch as we continue on through the count for this and upcoming flights. So thanks to you for supporting us in that venture. As we prepare to see the launch of SpaceX's workhorse vehicle, the Falcon 9, let's go ahead and talk about it with a little more specificity. The vehicle stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall, and it has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. The majority of that is made up by the first stage, which again, this booster tail number 1073, flying for a 17th time today. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin 1D engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen and produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are the black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, today they're using the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure, that inner stage, which consists of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In this image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere tail first like a big old dart towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage of the Falcon 9. In the first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches before pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the interstage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space. It produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 23 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. The MBAC engine burns the same propellant mix, that being kerosene and liquid oxygen, same as the first stage. It will ignite for a third time after deployment of the Starlink satellites. It's a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it will burn up and help eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the rocket are the payload fairings containing the 23 Starlink satellites. Fairings are a carbon composite material and are 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. The two halves of the payload fairing will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. They gently splash down under the support of parachutes. They'll be recovered nominally and brought back to Port Canaveral alongside the booster, brought to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and eventually refurbished and turned around for future flights. SpaceX is in the process of certifying both its payload fairings as well as its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights each. Now, T minus 10 minutes, 9 seconds, and counting. We're just about 3 minutes away from the point in which SpaceX will start thermally conditioning those nine Merlin 1D engines by flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. We're now T minus 7 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Coming up on the engine chill down sequence here. I want to thank the more than 9,500 of you who are watching with us live. Certainly appreciate you checking in for, again, launch number 2 of potentially 3 that SpaceX has on tap this weekend. Taking a look at the live chat, I want to thank some of you for your support this morning. And thanks to John Anderson for joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, John. Glad to have you with us. Thanks to Tim Martin for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate your support. Kelly Alexander marking 1 month of membership at the pad leader level. Glad to see you sticking with us, Kelly. Appreciate that. One of our wonderful moderators, Clistia Lee, and channel member as well, with a very generous $20 super chat. And perhaps picking up on a bit of the graveliness of my voice this morning, saying for Will's Tea and Halls Fund. Yes, well, being here in Southern California has been wonderful and had some great reporting opportunities, multiple time zones, and perhaps not the greatest sleep and a change in pollens have done a bit of a number on my throat. So apologies for any additional graveliness or extended pauses where I'll take an extra sip of water just to make sure we can keep going with this whole thing. Uh, Thanks to Frank Sherlock for a $2 super chat. Now under 6 minutes before liftoff. At this point, the first stage kerosene tank should be now completely full. Charles McMahon back with another very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Charles. Saying thank you for all the great information and coverage. Appreciate your support in making that happen, Charles. Mandy Moon with the $2 super chat. Thank you, Mandy. Michael McRory marking 7 months as a Spaceflight Now channel member at the spacecraft commander level. Saying, I think we've got 3 launches in a day. Well, we have got at least one with Rocket Lab. We're looking at number 2 in just a hair over 5 minutes. And potentially, if all remains on track with SpaceX launching the Space Norway Arctic satellite broadband mission in now less than, or just about 11 hours from now, that would be number 3. So yeah, it is potentially a triple launch day. Very busy time for us here at Spaceflight Now. 12Z Train with a $10 super chat. Thank you, 12Z, one of our wonderful channel members. Michael McRory also gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that generosity, Michael. To our newest 5 members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Finally, for now, SG marking 5 with a $5 super chat. Now starting to hear some of the hisses and hums from the pad there. SpaceX is pulling back the strong back. Just a little bit away from the Falcon 9 rocket in preparation for liftoff just under 4 minutes from now. And as we come into these final 3.5 minutes, appreciate the more than 12,000 of you who are joining with us live. If you're just popping in and haven't done so already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. It shows the YouTube algorithm that folks are here and engaged, and it'll allow this stream to pop up higher for folks that maybe wanted to join in and catch this launch as it happens. We are coming up on the end of stage 1 liquid oxygen load. Should hear that call out in just a few seconds.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Hear that call there? Looking past the payload fairings, a very beautiful shot of Florida's Space Coast. Now 2.5 minutes from liftoff today. Very quickly want to thank Daniel H. for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership, and to Naz Garden for a $5 super chat. Saying, watching for my podcast out of Orlando. Wonder if that's a typo and you mean porch, but regardless, thanks for watching.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that, the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant, preparing for liftoff in less than 2 minutes. That additional venting you're seeing there are the ground gas closeouts. Here, the SpaceX make the call for that in just a moment.
Gas launch closeout has started.
Hear that good call? Next, you'll be hearing that the Falcon 9 is in startup. Its control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. Propellant tanks will also be brought up to flight pressure right about now. Process beginning.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call from SpaceX there. In about 5 seconds, we should hear the SpaceX launch director give their go for launch.
LD go for launch.
And with that, we
Launch abort
are
is running.
in abort by the sounds of it. Standing by for more. But we did hear that call that SpaceX has aborted the mission. No explanation given as to why. Because SpaceX runs a load and go operation for the Falcon 9, they are not able to hold the fueling process once it has begun and turn around for a future opportunity. And this was also the end of today's launch window. SpaceX ending their broadcast stream without an explanation for the reason that they aborted the mission. We'll stand by to see if they share any kind of statement on social media. So we're working to learn more about why just moments after the SpaceX launch director said they were go for launch, that they scrubbed the mission. As we mentioned at the start of our coverage, they had pushed back the T0 time multiple times throughout the countdown process and had not cleared the pad until about T minus 2 hours and 15 minutes prior to the T0, back when that was targeting liftoff at 10:49. Normally, the blast zone is cleared about 3 hours prior to launching a Falcon 9 rocket. So they may have been working a technical issue, which I will couch with a giant asterisk, may have contributed to the abort. But again, we are standing by for additional information. If you're just joining us, SpaceX was less than a minute away from launching its Falcon 9 rocket. The vehicle had been fully fueled. Falcon 9 was in startup. The SpaceX launch director had issued their go for launch. And just moments after that, we heard the abort call made. Of course, not the ideal result that fans of watching rocket launch would like to see, but most importantly for SpaceX and SpaceX as the customer of this launch as well. They want to make sure that the rocket is fully healthy and that they're able to safely get their payload into the correct orbit, and certainly cognizant of all public safety impacts as a part of all of that. And so, for whatever reason, they did decide to abort this mission. We will, of course, bring you more information as we learn it. We're standing by for now. Again, if you're just joining us, the launch attempt of the Starlink 10-7 mission was aborted in the final minute prior to liftoff. Falcon 9 was already in startup. The SpaceX launch director had just given their approval for launch when the abort call was made. And unfortunately, SpaceX concluded its broadcast prior to stating a reason for the abort. SpaceX teams were working out at the pad a little bit closer to liftoff than nominally by about 45 minutes. Again, we cannot say conclusively or directly if that may have had any tie-in to the reason for the scrub call. Just noting some one item of potential interest that was slightly different than normal, I'll say. So far, SpaceX has not issued any kind of comment or statement as to the reason for the abort call. If the reason is something that is not too terribly difficult to work through, SpaceX does have a 24-hour backup opportunity for this mission, with a launch window that opens tomorrow morning, that being Monday, August 12th at 6:37 a.m. Eastern, 10:37 UTC for those joining around the world. Presumably, whatever caused the scrub today, obviously, will be looked at closely and made sure that SpaceX understands the issue at hand before they proceed with this launch. We'll also be keeping close tabs on if there might be any knock-on effects to the Space Norway Arctic satellite broadband mission launch, which is set to lift off from Vandenberg Space Force Base, currently targeting a T0 liftoff of 7:02 p.m. Pacific, 10:02 p.m. Eastern, 02:02 UTC. If for whatever reason that mission is unable to launch today, they also have a 24-hour backup opportunity on Monday at 6:58 p.m. Pacific. Again, no word from SpaceX yet at this point. Minutes after the abort was called, the weather was certainly optimal, and given that the SpaceX launch director had just given their go for launch moments before the abort call was made, something out of character came up, and looking to learn more about that. And of course, we'll keep you apprised of what we learn as we learn it. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our live launch coverage. Do you want to thank a couple more folks for your support this afternoon or still morning? Uh, Kristen Thompson with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Kristen, saying, so happy to be here. Wish I could be watching from the beaches of Cocoa this morning, but enjoying the video from Orlando. Obviously, coming in before the scrub call was made. And to Mitchell Wilbur, a very generous $20 super chat from one of our wonderful channel members. Thank you, Mitchell. Saying, thanks, guys. Good job as always. Well, thank you, Mitchell. And hopefully next time around, we'll actually have a launch on the other end of live launch coverage. But of course, as those who have been around the bend for a while know, this is just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So I want to thank our team for being ready at the standby for the launch opportunity today. Our thanks to Chuck and Jen Briggs and to Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, our photographer Adam Bernstein there at the press site, as well as to our wonderful moderators Stephanie B and Callistia Lee, to our editor Stephen Young with Spaceflight Now, and most importantly to all of you for being with us and spending part of your morning in anticipation of live launch or of launch. Appreciate you being here with us for our live launch coverage, though. Again, we are still tracking the launch of the ASBM spacecraft tonight at 7:02 p.m. Pacific. Be sure to keep an eye on our social channels on Threads, Facebook, and Twitter, or X, formerly Twitter, for updates on both this Starlink 10-7 mission, any new launch opportunities presented there, as well as any potential changes to the Vandenberg mission tonight. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.